So, folks, as you all know, today's session as part of FDC 19 is with Shabnam Minwalla. Shabnam is one of those people for whom you say she needs no introduction, but I'll go ahead and do the honors in any case. It's a longish bio, but it's worth listening to because it's quite an inspiring bio as well. So, Shabnam is a mother of 3 teenagers, ardent saree shopper, and a Mumbai-holic. She spent most of her life in words, editing school magazines, working as a journalist with the Times of India, and writing nonfiction. She writes for various publications, but mainly she writes for kids. Her first book, The 6 Spellmakers of Dorabji Street, is being used as a reader and has been performed as a play by many Mumbai schools. Her book for younger readers like Super Shy Girl, Lucky Girl, When Jiya Met Urmila are immensely popular. The Shy Supergirl, was shortlisted for the Singapore-based Red Dot Award when Jiya Met Urmila won the Neve Book Award. What Maya Saw is a fantasy clue hunt in Mumbai that was also nominated for Crossword, Neve, and Peekaboo Awards. It's set in Xavier's, Shabnam was just telling me, St. Xavier's College in Mumbai. She's also written a Laugh a Minute Nimmi series, short stories in a number of anthologies, a stack of picture books, and a modern non-fiction book on Mumbai neighborhood, on the Mumbai neighborhood of Kolaba. Her 2 new books are Saira Zariwala is Afraid and Murder at Daisy Apartments. This is a copy of Murder at Daisy Apartments. Have delighted horror and mystery buffs. Her latest book, Zen, which I just finished reading, is a mixture of history, politics, romance, and has been greeted by fantastic reviews. It has won the Times of India AutHer Award for 2024 for the Children's Book of the Year and has been shortlisted for AttaGalatta and Neve Book Award, and also for Valley of Words, right? So you might be coming here for that. So Valley of Words, for those of you who know, is a lit fest that happens in Dehradun. Okay, I'm going to take a very quick break and let people in because there's some 10 people. All right. So this is Zen. This is the one that I was talking about. It's a fat book, 600 pages, but it's not a heavy read because I think there's about 60, 70 pages worth of just text messages in there, right? Which the diary makes up for. But it's a fun read and it keeps you engaged. I didn't have to work too hard. I finished it in about less than 6 days, probably 4 or 5 days I finished it. So I was able to easily do 100 pages a day, and I'm not a fast reader. Because it's YA, because it's light, and also because it's very, the plot keeps you, holds you. So it was fun for me to read. Yeah, so Shabnam is out there a lot. She's at JLF, Bukaru, Kala Ghoda Festival, Tata Lit Live. In terms of education, she got her MA in journalism from the University of South California in LA. And she was also a Evening Scholar at Wolfson College in Cambridge. Her most recent book is a little morbid sounding. It's called The Body in the Pool. And it's a YA murder mystery, but there you go. So welcome, Shabnams. Thanks so much for making the time and for talking to all of us. I want to get started, as always, by just saying, how did you get into kids book writing? You were a journalist, you had a steady journalism job. So then how come kids book from there? That's a bit of a transition, right?
So this is a story I tell all the children at all the many workshops I do, and they find it very exciting. So like you said, I was a journalist for 10 years and totally happy as a journalist. I loved the fact that one day I was covering the opening of a club, the next day interviewing some film star, third day covering a railway accident, fourth day being yanked out of my bed to go to an earthquake. I mean, it was really, there was never a boring moment. And then, of course, life takes a U-turn, and suddenly, within 3 years, I had not 1, not 2, but 3 babies.
Oh.
And yeah. And like I tell I ask the children at the schools I go to, have you ever seen a mummy with 1 baby? And they will all say yes. And I say, how does that mummy seem? And they all say busy, tired. So I was busy and tired into 3. And I was also very grumpy because I really missed being with words and being with stories and just being with the wider world. And life seemed to have shrunk into, mashing doodhi and tricking babies into opening their mouths so I could shove that teaspoon in, opening up that nappy and reeling back in dismay. And around that time, I asked myself what I really love about what I really would want to do. And it struck me that more than anything in the world, and I go through all these things with the children, more than jalebis, more than cupcakes, more than movies, more than even traveling. I think what I love is books. And it struck me that why I became a journalist was not because I wanted to become a journalist, but because I wanted to become a writer. So I thought this is a good time for me to attempt to write a book, because at this point, nobody's expecting anything from me except that I keep these 3 babies sort of functioning, sort of not too smelly, sort of, gaining a little weight. So I started trying to write a book, and it was a miserable disaster because it sounded like one really fat Times of India news report, 800-word news report multiplied into 100. It was a disaster, and I could not understand what was wrong. I think it took me sort of a year or two to detox from journalism.
Right.
And to understand that writing is the same, but writing fiction and non-fiction is also terribly different. Because non-fiction, journalism especially, is a lot about playing by the rules, right? You have your inverted pyramid, you have your who, what, when, where, why. However creatively you write, you have to be answering those basic questions, and you have to be sticking to facts. Non-fiction is really about breaking the rules. The more successfully you break the rules and sort of give a spin to things, the more successfully you write. And I think once that struck me, and once I realized that, every mother, every murderous mummy I was writing about did not have to be exactly like the woman I met at the garden, my writing became, I think, much freer and easier.
Right.
But having said that, when I sat down to write, I didn't want to write for children. I had more than enough children in my life, more than enough Winnie the Pooh and Charlie and Lola and Noddy and all of that. I wanted to write a murder mystery, dead bodies, fingerprints, puddles of blood. So it was with a little bit of disgust that I realized that the first line of my first book, the first line I wrote that I realized would become a book was something along the lines of, in Cozy Castle, there lived a court jester, a dragon, and an old crone who may or may not have had magical powers. And I looked at this and I thought, this is not feeling like an adult book with fingerprints and blood splatters. What is going on? But I allowed it to go. And I'm trying to find that book. Where are you? It became The 6 Spellmakers of Dorabji Street.
Ah, yes.
Set in a Mumbai building with 2 very mean old neighbors.
Right. Great. That's awesome. And I want to flash the cover of that image on the screen, if you're okay with it.
Yeah, of course.
It is this one here, right? Can you guys see this cover? I think it's a fantastic cover. It's the 6 Spellmakers of Dorabji Street, and it has this imagery right on top. And then you can scroll down and you see what the rest of it is like. But it's a very funky looking display, and it's just a very nice cover. So tell me, before we move, we don't have to follow our sequence of questions.
Yeah.
But I did have a question in there about book covers. So when you design a book cover like that one, which was so interesting and unusual, what is your involvement and how much does the publisher decide? How does it work?
So 6 Spellmakers was my first book, right? I was really new. I was so grateful to be published at all that anything they phoned me and said, I would say, yes, of course, yes, of course. I couldn't say yes, of course, loudly and quickly enough. 6 Spellmakers was actually, it was a combination of first-time writer and first-time editor. So I think both of us put in enormous energy into every little thing we did. So Jiya was my editor for this book, and it was the first book she was handling by herself. She approached an artist, apparently somebody quite famous in Delhi, and that lady said, my son is also starting, so why don't you approach him? So it became first-time writer, first-time illustrator, first-time editor. And I think together we all had a lot of fun.
Okay.
There is one scene in 6 Spellmakers which has generally become very popular in the schools, and it's the children stage a haunting to defeat one of the old women who want to cut down these 2 trees. And the cover is about the haunting. So I think we all agreed that the cover had to be about the haunting. But I think this was really the brainchild of the illustrator.
Okay,
Subsequent books, I've been more involved, less involved. It's a mix. So I'd like to show you one other cover. Now, what Maya saw, my book set in 12 years, is like a clue hunt through Mumbai. Okay. Now, the artist who did the cover, Kalyani Ganpati, had visited Mumbai a long time ago. But she went about it really cleverly. She said, okay, think of 100 things that for you spell Mumbai and send me images. So when I said BST bus, she didn't want one picture. She wanted about 20 pictures. So by the end, I must have sent her, like bombed her with like 2,000 pictures. At the end, this is the cover she sent me. And
Oh,
I
very
thought it's
nice.
just magnificent.
Right. Very nice. Yeah, it has a great feel to it.
Yeah.
So going back to your earlier thing, you said, that you had started thinking you would write about X, but then it turned into this book. So where do you think your stories turn up from? I mean, is it because of what you read, or is it coming from somewhere from whatever you might have read as a child?
It's always very difficult to say anything starts from one point, but
Yeah,
many of my books do start from one point, and then of course everything we've ever experienced comes into play.
yeah.
So let me tell you about, say, which book, What Maya Saw. Okay, so What Maya Saw, soon after I had my 3 babies, one day I got a call from the principal of St. Xavier's College, and he said, Shabnam, we are turning 140 years old, and we would like a book, a coffee table book on the college, and we'd like you to do the text. So I was super excited because Xavier's has always been my happy place in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And the chance to go back once you're an alum and go back
Yeah.
legitimately, not just go and lurk and say, oh, I used to be a child, I used to be a teenager here. And it just was very exciting. So I went back and I spent days and days and days in the library reading 140 years of the college magazine and the Paul Department magazine and,
Oh, wow.
everything. It was wonderful. One afternoon, it was a very, very hot afternoon in April, and the exams had just gotten over. So there were only two sad people in the library. The librarian, who was dozing at the library of Xavier's is this huge golden room, lots of ancient books and manuscripts that nobody's touched for 85 years, big windows, sun pouring in. So I was there looking through a very boring history book, and the librarian was dozing. And then suddenly I looked up and I was so frightened that I almost screamed, and literally I feel my heart stopped beating. Because when I looked up, right in front of me, I saw a girl, which is okay. I mean, girls have every right to be in the Xavier's library. But I thought, operative word is I thought she had horns coming out of her head. And but it was so real that I literally almost jumped up and started shrieking. Luckily, I blinked, looked again, realized it was a trick of light. But that 2 seconds of fear was so sort of stayed with me for so long that I think 3 or 4 years after it happened, one day I'd finished like 2, 3 other books and I was thinking, now what do I write? At that moment flashed before my eyes and became the starting point. And most of my books start with something little, just a moment
Sure,
that makes me
sure.
curious.
Sounds great. And so in Zen was interesting. Like I said, I loved it. I'm going to try and talk about it without giving anything away. But it's the first person here. It's a diary of somebody from about 85 years ago. And then there is also a third voice which comes up in the black pages,
Yeah.
which I will not talk about. It's very intriguing. It's a lot of fun. What's obvious also is that a lot of research has gone into it because the diary is from the 1930s, and there is a lot of detail, and there is a whole different world that you can see through those diary pages. But it's a complex book. It's not a simple book, and it's 600 pages long. But while it was complex and very long, it was not confusing. It was still, you had clarity in your head about who's what character doing what is this storyline, where is this going, what else is happening in the book, and all that. So how do you pull that off? So that was fascinating to me. What I want to also understand is there is clearly an autobiographical element in that book. So can you talk about that without giving away the ending?
Yeah, sure. So the book
Yeah.
actually came about through a number of coincidences. So a few years ago, I woke up one morning and found that I had been added on a chat called Love Letters. Now,
Okay.
when you're my age and you're added on a chat called Love Letters, you get quite excited and intrigued. It was exciting, not in the way one initially expects, but my cousin had started the chat and she had been clearing her cupboards and had found Her grandmother had died some years ago, and just before she died, she had called my cousin and shoved these little pieces of paper into her hand and said, "Don't show your mother, don't show your uncle, don't show anyone," basically. So my cousin had, it was a chaotic time. She just shoved it in the cupboard. Years later, during cleaning the cupboard, she found them, read them, realized they were the diary entries of her granny from 1935. And the diary entries begin with, "Today I got engaged. God bless that boy. How did he know I liked emeralds and chocolates?" And but very soon the tone becomes dark because she starts to ask, is it really possible to love someone whose arms you have been thrust into? And then there are very few pages, okay? There are about 30 tiny pages. And it's very irritating because we wished she had left the entire diary, but she seems to have ripped out a few choice pages and kept them. Over the pages, it becomes obvious that my grandmother's sister, had a little fling of some kind. We never know how much, how intense, how big, with a Hindu boy in the building.
Oh, nice.
And she refers to him with a Gujarati word that we were not able to properly understand, something like gabbar or ghablo or something awful like that. But so there was no real detail. But there are these absolutely evocative lines like, "I was sitting at the window. He walked past. His rhythmic walk is glorious. He has not forgotten me. He turned and gazed at me." And it's actually really remarkable because, like all of us, I too fall into the trap of stereotyping people, right?
Sure, yeah.
And if you had asked me what is the life of a Muslim girl in 1935, I would have imagined a very small, a very cloistered, a very curtained life, mentally and physically.
Mm-hmm.
This girl clearly did not have that. I mean, she goes to the market and has her hand read. The fortune teller says, "Love will come into your life." And she goes, "Where do I have the charms for that?" She goes and watches movies and reviews them with very curt, and "I wish I hadn't gone. What a waste of time." She's reading Gothic romances and she's falling in love with a Hindu boy. It's very clear how this love story is going to end. Okay. There are no two possible endings.
Yeah.
But the fact that she had this little luminous episode in her girlhood, I think just made me and my cousin extremely happy. And my cousin told me, do something with this. Now the diary had come to me. I spoke to my editor and mentioned it. And she said, "Write a book." But I was cowardly. I thought, how can I write an entire book set in 1935? I'm scared. A few years later, the anti-CAA protests happened, and my daughters were very involved. I spoke to the same editor. She used the same words, "Write a book." And for some strange reason, the fact that she used the same words about two very distinct episodes banged in my head. And I thought, maybe I can write a book about two girls. One where, she is fighting. It's a pre-independence time. The only thing that the country is thinking about really is its future. And now this is a time when India is fighting another kind of battle, struggling in another way, moving towards another direction, and talking about these two girls at these critical moments in our country.
Right.
That is, in a sense, how the book was born.
What fun. It's a lot of fun to read. I really enjoyed it. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about one question about writing for adults versus writing for children. So I know that you've also written for adults. You've been a journalist, of course, and then you choose to write for kids now. So what changes? What switches? How do things become any different when you do that?
A lot of people ask me this, and essentially, it's all about telling a story, whether you're writing for adults or you're writing for children. I think the joy about writing for children is childhood and that period of being a young adult, being an adolescent. It's a very vivid time of life. You feel everything very vividly, you see everything very clearly and with a great deal of interest, and you observe the world. You're not so, I think everything feels new and wonderful. And to tap into that makes writing very exciting. Children are also much more open to the kind of things I enjoy writing about, ghosts and, a little bit of ghost, a little bit of magic. So a lot of my books are set in Mumbai, are set in a very realistic, drab, grey city, but they have a flash of magic or supernatural, something like that. Children are very open and very excited, and they take it very for granted that is a part of it. And many of them will fight with me. We don't believe in magic. And then we will chat about how they would define magic, I would define magic. I'm not sure adults would come along for the ride in the same way. Having said that, I now have 3 daughters who are no longer exactly children. One is 20, 2 are 18.
Right.
I'm soon going to be in a house without children. Can I still write books for children? This is something I'm examining. I don't know. So I'm quite
having watched you for half an hour or 25 minutes, I can tell you the answer is yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then I had one question about publishing, and then we'll open it out to people. So you've published with how many? So we did a quick count, by the way, before we started the session, and Shabnam has 13 big books for kids, 13 picture books for kids, 2 non-fiction books, one on Kolaba, one on Xavier's. So there's like 28 different books that she's written, published, or been the author of in some form or manner. And this is probably spread across how many publishers would you say, Shabnam? 8, 10?
About 5, 6, I think.
About 5, 6. So is there a difference in publishing with a publisher who's mainly like a general publisher as opposed to somebody who publishes specifically for kids? If you're writing as kids books, like Tulika or whoever else.
It's all the editor. And okay. I will say one thing, children's publishing in India, it doesn't pay, it's not heavily marketed, but it is the sweetest space to be in. Everybody's friends, everybody knows everybody, everybody is writing across publishers, and there's no irritation, there's no lobbying, and everybody's clapping for everybody at awards.
Oh, very nice.
Just a lovely space. So no, I wouldn't, so Zen, for example, was published by Duckbill, which is a part of Penguin now. It started as an independent children's publishing house and is now a part of Penguin. So in a way, it's the best of both worlds. You have that big setup, but you have the care and love of a small publisher that really looks only at children's books. And I think even Harper, when you have a children's publishing unit within, they treat everything with love and care.
Oh, lovely. Very nice. By the way, I don't know if I ever told you this, but the person who recommended that I should read Zen was Jerry Pitto.
Oh.
And Jerry's editor is a gentleman called Ravi Singh, who you would know. And since you were mentioning that it's all about the editor, I wanted to tell everybody in the group as well. The next Sunday at 5 o'clock, we are meeting with Ravi Singh. Ravi Singh is Jerry Pinto's editor, and he's also the founder of Speaking Tiger, which is a very well respected, very well known, but indie publishing house. So, just as an FYI. Yeah. So clearly you're a big expert in talking about, kids writing and kids publishing and everything else. You are going to be coming to the retreat in November. Yeah. So all of this stuff is going to be part of it. Is there something else that specifically that you have in mind?
Well, I mean, definitely I will talk about the whole process of publishing for children, writing for children. I think character creation, setting, plot, and how that is a little different for children and adults, and how it's similar and different, all of that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. I'll drop the link in the chat. So if people in the WhatsApp group, so if people are interested, you can check it out. Okay, so if you have questions, folks, shoot them across, and then we can start taking the questions. The first question is, can someone put the name of the first book in the chat? Are you talking about the 6 Spellmakers of Dorabji Street? So that's her very first book. Then there is Zen, writing is magnetic, yes. A lot of them are just compliments. Okay, Deepna has a question. What are your favorite YA reads, Shabnam?
My favorite YA writers?
Yeah.
I love Rebecca Stead. She has written this incredible time travel book that, when I grow up, I want to write something like that. It's called When You Reach Me, and it is just the most marvelously clever book. I quite liked The Hate You Give, which became a very big kind of book in the US. I like the fact that, people have stopped seeing young adults only as an audience that will engage with vampires. And there was a time in which it was all Twilight and Vampire Diaries and things like that. Now it's a lot more serious. So in a way, Zen is also a slightly political book. The Hate You Give was, I think, very inspirational for many writers who realized that you can bring in real world issues into young adult space. Other young adult writers that I love, to think,
If you have
Perks of a Wallflower is a book I love.
Hmm.
Then,
Okay. And if you come up with other names or something else strikes you, drop me a message, because we have a
I will.
WhatsApp group of the community.
I
So
will.
I can share the list with everyone. But the ones I got was Perks of Being a Wallflower, When You Reach Me, and The
Yeah.
Hate You Give. So that's
Hate
great.
You Give. Yeah.
All right. Next question. Shabnam, you have had such an amazing and prolific writing career. What is your writing routine like? How much time do you spend writing each book? And also, please share about your self-editing and rewriting process.
So I'm a very slow writer. I'm a very painstaking writer. So to get that first draft is traumatic. But when I have the first draft, it's only like not even 50% of the process. I'm a huge rewriter. So I sometimes wonder if even a single word other than the names of the characters that I write in the first draft appear in the final draft. For example, Zen, I must have rewritten at least 100 times, because there is a lot of interplay between past and present, between colors, between all kinds of things. So while they're two different narratives, they also talk to each other in a way. So all of that I wove in very carefully. Every murder mystery I write, I will have like an initial draft, and then I will sort of pop the clues in very carefully. And then if a clue seems too obvious, pull it out. And so, yeah, I would say, okay, Zen took me 2.5 years to write, of which maybe one 1.5 years was writing and 1 year was rewriting. A book, small books. Now, if you look at a whole book, like this is not that big. This book took me 2 weeks to write, but it was also that inspiration, a burst of inspiration. You go and and then minimum rewriting. But okay, so my Nimi series, the 30,000 word small funny book set in school, they take about 3 months. And then, of course, the thing with humor is you have to be in the right mood for it, okay? Otherwise, it falls horrendously flat. So Nimi happens in 3 months if I'm happy. If I'm in a grumpy state, then Nimi can take a year. So a lot of it is all of that. Murder mysteries that way are great. You don't have to have any mood to kill people. It always comes well.
So there's a lot of, that's interesting, because a lot of your YA writing is actually about murder and crime, where a teenager is solving the murder, right?
Yes.
So but anyway, my questions are done. Next question. How easy, challenging is it writing from the perspective of a child as an adult? How do you steer clear of coloring their observations with your own understanding of the world?
It's tricky. It's very, very tricky. That's why I was really nervous about the first person narrative for a long time. The first first person book I did is called this one. It's called Saira Zariwala is Afraid. And I was really nervous about getting the voice right. But strangely, it just clicked. I've now done, I think, about 3 first person books. And again, rewriting is the way to go. And of course, having 3 children in the house really helps, because my teenagers then will vet it and say, this is not how we speak. This part's sounding wrong. So in a way, I have this, sort of family of editors just parked there, and very eager to give me very cruel feedback. So that helps. Yeah. But it is true that getting a child's voice right is sometimes tricky. Like I've never had the courage to go below 12 years, to do an 8-year-old voice. I'm not sure I can manage.
Okay. Right. Weber has a related question. He's saying, great energy, Shabnam ji. How did you unlearn journalistic style to cross over to fiction? I am trying that.
So how do I think part of it is, of course, having 3 children, it sort of erases all memory of journalism and all of that. But it's difficult. And I think, how do you see? So journalism actually feeds fiction brilliantly in a way. Once you understand that you don't have to obey the rules of journalism, then journalism is a marvelous tool, because nobody knows a city, nobody knows the inside of random houses or the corridors of high courts or doctors' dispensaries and random places like a journalist does.
Right.
In fiction, your character is going to different places, and if you've been a journalist or if you've been in a profession that has taken you to many places, it's so easy to visualize and create those settings, realistic settings. It just They're there. They're there in your head. You don't have to go and do any research. Also, the ability to do research it's wonderful. For example, Zen, 1935, how do you research? Do you know whether they had fridges in 1935? Do you know if they had phones in 1935? I didn't know. And I was like, how am I going to find out? So what I did is I sat and I started reading every single newspaper of the Bombay Chronicle, starting January 1st, 1935, up to about April 1936. So for a few months, that's all I did, read the papers. Whenever I was, not in a mood to write, or whenever I didn't have too much time, I'd sit for an hour and read. And just make points. So I had this whole diary full of things about 1935, and suddenly and miraculously, one day I found an ad put by BST, Bombay Electric Supply and Transport Company, a new invention called a refrigerator available for rent for 14 rupees 35 paise for a month. And there my question was answered, and I was so excited. And immediately, of course, the original Zainab's family had to decide to sort of get themselves a refrigerator and discuss recipes. So it was great fun.
Interesting. So you've talked about the setting, but did any story, this is Namrata's question, no, this is Sakshi's question, has any story also come out of that reporting?
Let me think. So not. Well, my book, a non-fiction book on Kolaba, in a way was a fully journalistic effort. And the stories of the past fed Zen and continue to feed everything I'm doing. But no, I don't think. So a lot of the characters I met as a journalist have popped up across my books. They're everywhere. For example, in Six Spellmakers, there is this, the kids are trying to defeat these two old women, and one of them is a very undefeatable woman named Mrs. Kotadia, who wears a white sari and has her hair scraped into a bun and is generally so mean that all her children have vanished to places like Papua New Guinea. So it takes them at least 3 days to arrive in Bombay when they are summoned. And the only thing that her only vulnerability is that there is this guy who writes this horoscope in the papers, and the daily sort of fortune, the column. So the kids go to find him. Now, as a journalist, I had the horrid task of laying out this page called Leisure in the Sunday Times. Okay, so it had a bridge column, and it had various comics and things like that, and it had the horoscope done by this very famous guy called Bejan Daruwala. Yes. Yeah, he was like a Bombay institution. Yeah, and he lived in this crumbling Kolaba hotel, and he would send all the horoscopes on these little chits of paper, and we literally had to piece them together. And so often we couldn't read his handwriting, so I'm very sorry to say that nothing that appeared in Times of India was entirely authentic. But I felt this is a man made for fiction. This is a man made for children's fiction. So he plays a role in Six Spellmakers. Oh, nice. The number of adults who wrote to me saying, was that Bejan Daruwala? It was amazing. People were so thrilled. Strangers found my email from God knows where to write. So yes, I mean, being a journalist has fed fiction in many ways. Yeah.
Right. Next question is from Namasri. What are the current expectations of publishers from children's writers in India?
Okay, so in Indian publishing in general, there's this desire for people to do something a little different, to not stick to the straight and narrow. And look, I love formula murder mystery, so I stick to the straight and narrow in many ways. But what they really would like is somebody sort of doing something extraordinary, breaking rules, just doing something that would make an international splash, I would say. That is something that everyone is looking for. That has not so far happened. But of course, clean writing, good characters, some fiction that speaks to your audience. And today our audience is Indian children. Yeah. It makes such a difference to Indian children to have fiction set in India. I cannot tell you the number of children who come to me and say, oh, Nivi and Sarita ate in Theobroma. We love going to Theobroma, and even we order the brownies there. That immediate connection.
Yeah. Very nice.
So
Next question, could you share any points to keep in mind when writing early chapter books for 6 to 9-year-olds, like a duckbill whole book?
yeah. So the point of the whole book is you're telling the child, this is your book. This is a whole story that we are going to tell you. It's a proper story. It's no longer, Meera goes to the market, Meera sees a cabbage, Meera sees a cauliflower, Meera sees a red watering can. It is now a proper story, the kind of story that your older brother or sister is reading. But our promise to you is that the sentences are going to be readable, the words are going to be small and readable. So I think with the whole book, whenever I write a whole book, I want a very satisfying story, a story that will make your young reader feel very good. So, a little mystery that is solved, or a little situation which has a very satisfying ending that will please a child of 7 or 8. But the language has to be, it does not have to be boring, but it has to be simple. No huge words, no very complex sentences with clauses and subclauses and all of that. But it should be great fun. Um, I think the whole book is just like it's a magnificent series. It's just really fantastic. And the number of children who will reach out to a whole book because they know that it's going to fulfill this promise is amazing.
The question was, what do you keep in mind when you're writing a book like that?
So when you write a book like that, I think you keep the language in mind, you keep the words in mind, but you make sure that the story is fairly complex. A full story. So I'll tell you, I'll show you my 3 whole books. Shy Supergirl, it's a girl with superpowers. She solves a mystery of an owl silver owl that is stolen, and uses her superpowers to find the criminal. Jiya Met Urmila is a story. Actually, Jiya Met Urmila came about because the editors said, move out of the safe middle class space and do something different. Okay. So at that point, I kept thinking, how does one, this is 5,000 words. Within 5,000 words, it's tough enough to serve up a story. Forget about something different. Then I wrote this book about a friendship between children of 2 economic classes, and how they made friends and fought against a common enemy. So, the point I'm trying to make is that in 5,000 words, you have to create your characters. So you have to keep few characters. You can't be developing too many characters, but your main characters have to be really solid, and there has to be a really good resolution, because children that age want a really good and strong, satisfying ending. They want the villains to be defeated horribly. They want the main character to have a very good time of it. They want a very big and happy ending. So
okay, great, that's helpful. Any good Indian young adult books that you would recommend, like you talked about When You Reach Me and Rebecca?
So I love Andalib's books.
Okay.
Asmara's Summer is one of my favorite romance books. Henna Startup is lovely. I'm trying to think about other young adult writers. Vibhi Batra's done some lovely books. So there's a lot of middle grade to young adult. There's a lot of new writing out there. Who would my other favorite? Anushka Ravi Shankar is not young adult. It's middle grade. But her Moen and the Monster is a book for all ages and for all times and forever. It is truly one of the funniest books I've read in my life. And it was so funny. We were a no TV household. So every day I would read stories to my 3 girls when they were little. And this book was banned because they used to laugh so much while eating that they would puke all the food out. So no Moen and the Monster at dinner. So I highly recommend that book, whatever age.
That is a lovely book. All right, great. Next question. There's a true fan here saying, I can't believe I'm interacting perhaps with the one author who, along with Andalib, has completely cornered the young adult. My heart is with her astoundingly vivid recreation of Mumbai. The question is, I even maintained a whole diary of notes for Saira Zariwala.
Oh gosh.
I think I have a soft spot for her. How do you recreate ordinary, boring, dreary Mumbai and give it this magic realism touch? How much do your daughters help you?
I I don't think Bombay is ordinary or boring. Okay, so we begin with that. It looks ordinary and boring, but beneath the surface, it is the most vivacious and throbbing city. And I think once you plug into that energy and you realize that nothing is what it pretends to be, that behind every grey facade is some man who claims to be a healer through flower remedies, or a villainous registrar of university who's managed to siphon off like untold millions, then you know that this is a city with a lot going on. And yeah, see, so like I said, a lot of my books have the realism of journalism. Okay, a lot of so most of the books I've written, if there's a drive, I will actually go and do that drive and time it, especially if it is in a critical part of the story. For example, in Saira Zariwala, there's a drive from Lal Bagh to Dadar at Diwali time. So I actually timed that drive to understand how quickly that boy would make it, because it's very important. Saira will die if he doesn't reach quickly enough. So he better reach quickly enough, but it has to be realistic. So journalism and the reality of Bombay is very much there. And then into that, I love introducing a little bit of supernatural. I love magic and I love the supernatural. I grew up in a family of Boras. My uncle was somebody who we grew up with a steady supply of the most amazing ghost stories. So in a way, all of that was just a part of my life and a part of my city, because I truly believed I saw ghosts everywhere. I still feel a corner of my house is haunted. And I'm quite convinced that once my girls go away, that ghost is going to become more powerful. So I'm a bit of a believer. So yeah, it's easy for me to bring that in. But really, for me, my Mumbai is not at all boring or grey. It is the most mad and wonderful city. And I was very lucky, because I had this very exciting bus ride every day from BT station, Times of India building, to Dadar, through Mohammad Ali Road, through Lal Bagh, through Parel. And you'd go past all these chiropractors and Unani healers and sellers of Baba suits and Superman outfits and bangles. And it was truly a colorful ride. And that is my city. So.
It sounds like a love affair. All right. If a book for middle grade readers aims to promote social awareness, that is in varied areas of life, what special approach writing techniques would you recommend? So before I let you answer, I'm going to talk about this character Zen in Shabnam Minwalla's book. Actually says at one point that I don't like stories with morals, and that stuck with me. But now go ahead and answer the question.
So, sorry, so can you explain a little what you mean? Would this be fiction? Would this be non-fiction?
Pradipta, Pradipta Soni, do you want to answer that? Clarify?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it's going to be fiction, definitely. But then, for example, right now I'm working on a project which highlights the child labor situation in India, as well as I'm going to club it up with neurodiversity. That's my third project. So both are half done.
Okay,
so
wow.
So like when I started writing, I was determined that I would write, only for children, about children, So, and like, it's like my motto is now, books with a cause. So like I did extensive research and I found that there is no book like it in the Indian market till now. So I'm halfway through and drafting a proposal to send over for traditional publishing.
Yeah.
But as someone has experienced like you, and those wonderful stories and your experiences and your creativity, enthusiasm, what you put in as an author for children is amazing. So, this kind of a thing, some kind of
so, Pradipta, I'm going to jump in. I think we got the question. You want to go ahead, Shabnam?
So I think whenever you write, even if it is about a cause, you cannot forget the basics of what a child would like to read. Okay, so I think the cause, or the what you want to do with the book has to be part of it, but it cannot be the only thing. It cannot be the thing right in front, and it cannot be slapping the kid on the face. Okay, so it has to be part of a story that is otherwise entertaining. You can't forget that entertainment element.
Yes, absolutely.
And it has to be woven in. It can't be this thing of, the kid reads it and feels panicked. It has to be part of the bigger thing, because that is the way that the children then start asking questions, start, really engaging with the book. If they feel that the book is giving them this moral, giving them this lesson, talking down to them in any way, they will switch off. Because children today, more than ever before, have so many options in terms of what they want to do with that precious half an hour they have between two tuition classes, that so it is very valuable, and the children will react really well to questions which appeal to their mind and their heart. But it has to be part of the bigger story, and the story has to engage with them the way any other story would engage with a child. That is what I feel very strongly. So
Great.
when I was writing Jiya, Urmila also, I found it very difficult because, the two girls from different classes, how do they meet? And I realized the reality of our lives in our cities is very unlikely that an upper middle class girl and a girl from a chawl will actually meet and become friends. So how to do it that in a way that is fun, it's quite scary. So good luck, but I'm sure it will be wonderful.
Great. Thank you so much. Next question is from Colin Furtado, which you've sort of alluded to in the past. What is the structure that you follow when writing a children's book? So I'm wondering if there is actually one structure, but the question is, what is the structure?
So I'm a very instinctive writer, and I write and what I really do is then I read it aloud. And if at any point I feel I'm flagging, my interest is going, then I feel this is wrong, there's something off with the structure. I mean, we all know the conventional structure. It works as well with children books as any other, your rising action, falling action, all of that. But honestly, I don't have a single structure. I don't think there is a single structure. Playing around with structure is actually great fun. Doing the unexpected is actually great fun. And so again, okay, so for me, I feel my answer to all these questions is rewriting. What I really do is after I get a first draft, I put that book away ideally for a month. Often I don't have that luxury. So for a week or 10 days, and return to it with fresh eyes. And at that point, you really see the flaws. You feel, okay, something different should happen here, or it's going slow. I need something dramatic to happen, or you need to shift chapters around. So at the moment, for example, I'm writing a book where this event has taken place a long time ago. It's 11 years later. So some of it is, things that people are reminiscing about. Some of it is things that are happening. A lot of it is text messages. So there are a lot of pieces. It's like a mosaic, and I just cannot get the flow right. So I keep putting it away, going back to it, juggling. And, one day it clicks. I think that is my only honest answer.
All right, sounds great. Thank you. This question from Medha is similar to the first one, which was about, trying to have a message. I'm writing a children's book that uses a fictional story to simplify astrophysics concepts. I struggle with staying true to the science while writing a compelling story. I'm also struggling to figure out how much of the science children in the 7 to 9 year age will understand. Have you ever faced something similar, and how do you navigate it?
So I've done a series of maths books for Pratham, but they're for very little children. So, Pratham just contacted me and said, do one book on time, do one book on numbers, do one book on addition. So it's very different because the level of complexity that you're talking about is way greater. But, no, I mean, this is just a coincidence, but my brother is a string theorist and his wife is a writer. So together they did a book on black holes for Pratham. And I know that my sister-in-law had a tough time. So she did it like a little adventure story. And I think what they finally did is they did the story, and then I think they did a little separate section on the science towards the end for the readers that really wanted to go deep. So the story really tells you about the superficial and the big picture. And then those who really want to understand the science will turn and read that. Now, Pratham has this whole educational slant to it, so it works for a Pratham book. For pure fiction, I'm not sure. I've never done anything like this, but so I really don't know what level of detail you would go into for something like this. I think a good way maybe to do it would be to read textbooks for 7, 8, 9-year-olds. Just see the kind of science they're exposed to in school to understand the level at which you pitch your science. That's
Fair
how I
enough.
would go about it.
And I think maybe the string theory book or the black holes book of Pratham would be an interesting one to look at as
Yeah.
well.
So
Yeah.
my sister-in-law's name is Ananya Dasgupta. I can't remember the name offhand. But if you look up Ananya Dasgupta, Story Weaver, you'll find this book.
Perfect. Sounds great. We'll take just one or two more questions and then we'll call it quits. So the next question is compliment. How do you have writer's block, and how do you get out of one?
Okay, so I had writer's block very, very often. And now I have writer's panic because, so I think writer's block is a bit of a luxury. Okay, you feel I can't write. Now I've made myself very, very disciplined in the sense that when I have those days that I can just sit and write, I make sure whether the words are flowing or not, I sit in front of the computer and I write. And there is every chance that what I write on that day will be rotten. What I write on that day will never appear in the final book. But I get the sense of motion. I get the sense that things are moving along. And I think what happens is your brain continues working. So I'll give you one example. In Maya Saw, there was this one character called Sanat. He's a boy from Sri Lanka and Maya has a crush on him. And he's a bit of a mysterious figure. So he popped up in the story and even I had no idea what role he was playing. I knew it was an important role. Whether he was one of the villains, whether he was one of the good guys, I couldn't tell. And I was completely blocked. I just could not. So I kept writing other parts, but I knew that it was crunch time and I had to figure out what this boy was doing. But the fact that you keep pushing on with your writing means that your brain is continuing to think and it's continuing to work. And one day I was sitting, I vividly remember this moment in a traffic jam in Worli. And suddenly I thought, I know what Sanat is. And that answer just came to me like that. And I'm telling you, if I had just given into writer's block and said, I can't write, I don't think I would have got the answer. So I went back home and deleted like 7,000, 8,000 words.
Oh boy.
I did. Yeah. But,
Correct.
but
All right, great. Thank you so much for that. There's one last question, which is more of a comment where somebody's saying that are you actually hang on, let me just read it out instead of. There's lots of thank you messages, but it's a very interesting message that this gentleman has said. He's saying that Suman actually has written a couple of blog posts for us as well. Thanks, Shabnam. It's brilliant listening to you. It's a dull, drab day where I live, but your energy has brightened it up. My question is, why is it that murder mystery writers appear so happy in personal life? Do you find yourself expelling your dark thoughts or experiences through fiction, or is it always as much fun to write as it seems listening to you? So we'll take that as the last question.
Okay, so there is one book where I actually did dispose happily of a man that I would like to dispose of in the real world, but as that cannot be, I happily disposed of him in fiction. And my mother was terrified. She said, people will guess. His name is so similar to the real. So then she made me change the name. Then she made me change the names of the characters. And even now she shudders to think that he will one day pick up this book, read it, and recognize himself as the very unlovely corpse on the pages. So yeah, it's a very convenient way to tackle your enemies. And it's good fun. Now, murder mysteries are essentially puzzles.
Right.
They're essentially studies of human beings and complex puzzles where you're fitting in pieces and having a lot of fun, a lot of inside jokes to yourself.
Perfect. So we're going to wrap up with a quick rapid fire. I'm going to ask you 3, 4, 5 questions. You have one, like 30 seconds or 10 seconds.
I hate these. Okay.
So first, so what is the one thing you dislike in kids' books?
I hate talking down and I hate morals. Okay. I like Zen. I don't like morals.
Right. Great. Which of your books is your own favorite?
I don't have a favorite daughter. I don't have a favorite book. Okay. So sorry, I'm spoiling your rapid fire.
No problem. Is there a fan or a piece of fan mail that you remember distinctly? Something specific?
Yeah. So after my first book came out, I got an email from a little girl. I don't know where she was from, how she got my email address. She wrote to me and she said, Auntie, we now every day, all my building friends have read your book and we all go down and we all play Nivi, Sarita, Mrs. Potania and Mrs. Braganza. That is our favorite game. And I was so thrilled to think that it had become an imaginary game for some random building complex somewhere was truly joyful.
Oh, that's so beautiful. All right. What's your favorite kids' book villain?
Mrs. Trunchbull, without competition.
Ah, yes. That's Matilda, right?
Yeah, all
Ah.
Roald Dahl actually. Even the two aunts in James and the Giant Peach, all they're delicious.
All right. And last question, everything is in Bombay, but if you had to pick a number 2 location, what would your number 2 location be?
So the book I'm writing now has a little bit of Goa and a little bit of Matheran. It's all, which is all extended Bombay anyway, but still. Okay.
Okay. But let's say if you did not have Bombay available to you and somebody said, we want you to write a book which is not set in Bombay, where would you set it?
Only other city I've lived in is Los Angeles, and that was a long time ago and a short while. If not Bombay, then probably Chennai, where my husband is from, because I know it a bit.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic
Pleasure.
speaking with you, Shabnam.
Thank you.